Welcome to the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast, the show committed to helping you dismantle the destructive mindset programs keeping you stuck in the proverbial bunker of poor performance so you can get out of your own way and play to your potential. My name is Paul Salter. I'm a high-performance hypnotherapist and mindset coach with 16 years of experience helping thousands of individuals like you get unstuck. This podcast features a collection of solo episodes, conversations with scratch and plus handicap golfers, and master classes with top experts in the performance psychology space. The one goal? To help you make playing to your potential a habit. Hey, fellow golfer. Welcome back to another episode of the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Salter, the golf hypnotherapist, and today I have a story that is indescribably inspiring. If you need a story that will not only inspire you, but make you feel and cultivate a deeper level of persistence, grit, and commitment to your goals, well, look no further. That is the story, the episode, the conversation with today's guest, Gary Christian. Gary was born in England and played collegiate golf at Auburn University, where he honed his skills before, well, not eventually, but I guess in the long run, finally earning his pro card. He spent years upon years playing on mini tours, including the Hooters and Nationwide Tour, eventually now known as the Korn Ferry Tour, before finally earning his PGA Tour card at, get this, age 40. He spent time living out of his car, living with friends, working full-time jobs, trying to raise a family, all while simultaneously attempting to earn his PGA Tour card, which, again, did finally happen at the age of 40. Today's conversation shares more about Gary's story, which is a testament to perseverance, demonstrating that success in golf is as much about resilience and mindset as it is about talent. And you're going to get a firsthand look into Gary's mindset, the strategies and principles he applied to finally break through and earn his pro card. Without further ado, please help me welcome Gary to the show. Hey, Gary, thank you so much for making the time to join me on an episode of the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. So I'm looking forward to a nice chat and see where the conversation leads us.
Absolutely. And I don't think I have the vocabulary to express how indescribable your story, your journey is. And we're going to highlight many facets of it along the journey and conversation we have today. But I want you to start here. Take us back to the darkest moment of your journey on your quest to obtaining your PGA Tour card. What was the darkest, hardest moment where perhaps you really thought about throwing in the towel on this dream of yours?
Well, I think it was actually after my senior year of college. I went from all SEC at Auburn in my junior year to barely making the travel team. I switched equipment, completely lost all the confidence in my swing, and was actually going to go home. I was fully prepared to leave America and go back to my rather boring job just outside London administering pension schemes. So I've been very fortunate in that I've been surrounded by people, partly through my relationship building and partly through being, pretty nice guy, someone with a good work ethic, and people saw good things in that, and they want to help. Americans are incredibly generous, but also, maybe there's that spiritual side of things that, people will put in your life to help you at just about the right time. And so a family allowed me to live with them for a couple of years and gave me an opportunity to at least get a semblance of a golf game back to see if there was a future in it. But to be honest, in all honesty, I never really had an overriding goal of making the PGA Tour. I just wanted to see how good I could get. I wanted to see how much progression I could make every single year. And if that meant the pinnacle of my career as NCAA Division I golf, great. If it was mini tour golf, great. If it was Korn Ferry Tour, great. If it was PGA Tour, well, that's obviously the cherry on the top. But, in all honesty, I wouldn't say it was the most vivid picture dream of mine at the start of the journey. However, as the journey went along, I could see, okay, there is a possibility this could happen.
That's fascinating, because knowing what I know about your story and how much of a prioritization you put on mindset and visualization along the way, it's fascinating to me that early on, the end goal, if you will, wasn't as clear as one might imagine. But I guess really where I'm curious, and I have so many questions, is what was the threshold or the experience that had to happen where you might have actually quit? The way that I'm hearing you is like you weren't 100% certain the PGA was the end goal. You wanted to maximize your potential. Was there ever a thought process that began to enter, like, if X does or doesn't happen, I'm going to hang up my clubs and walk away from this pursuit toward playing to my potential?
I don't think so. I'm very much a realist. And so obviously that senior year at Auburn, realism kicks in and says, you're not cut out to be a professional golfer. And so that extra 2 years, 3 years, 4 years gave me that ability to get back to where I needed to be. But the great thing about my career was I always knew how to win. I always won every single year on the mini tours. And, I accomplished a goal that most people would find hard to do, which is to make money every single year on the mini tours, purely because I had the ability to win. So what that showed you was, number one, physically, you have a really good game. And number two, mentally and emotionally, you're a pretty strong golfer as well. So, the results proved that you have something. There's something there to lend the belief. If you turned up every week and a good week was 10th or 5th on the mini tours, then, in all honesty, you're not cut out to be a professional golfer on the PGA Tour. But obviously that was the opposite for me. So I took great pride in that ability I knew I was going to win 2, 3, 4 times a year, which obviously with the purses being top heavy, that gets you ahead of the game, and it takes a little bit of the financial stress out of things, which is obviously one of the huge considerations for players on the mini tours.
Yeah. And what I hear is just the value of having the intangibles. Let's be frank, you're not the biggest, strongest, most powerful, longest driver on the tour during your career, yet you have this resounding depth of belief in yourself, this confidence you are going to give it your all, outwork others. And I'm just really curious. Like I hear a remarkable story like yours, one of perseverance, grit, accomplishment, patience. And I always come back to, like, there's got to be a driving why behind it all. So many sacrifices, so many hardships and experiences that you endured to achieve what you've achieved. And you mentioned, I wanted to see how far I could take it, see what my potential was. Is there a deeper why that kept you grinding, living out of your car during a certain period of time that kept you going?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was, in all honesty, no plan B. I mean, it's, it's not like I came from a cushy country club background where, daddy could get me a job with the family business, or, Mr. Smith, who's the president of the club, who always thought I was a great golfer, has always got an insurance agency ready to go as soon as I stopped wanting to play. I sacrificed everything. I left my family, my friends, my country, everything that I was comfortable with. I got a degree that was, basically useless. So it's not like I had an engineering degree or a medical degree to fall back on. And so, that was the driving force of, there were some tough times, obviously, when you're in your early 30s, you're playing on the mini tours and you keep missing out second stage, and you're seeing your friends have a career and they have, a family and nice cars and go on nice vacations and have a nice house and, everything that comes with success in business and hard work in business. They were reaping the rewards. I was working my ass off trying to become as good of a professional golfer as I could be. And at the end of the year, I might put $10,000 in my pocket. And, that was, it felt like a huge amount of money to have that go into my account. But it just kept me driving forwards, where I just knew that I was hungrier and I was tougher. I had given up more than almost everyone else there, because, when you do have that, that that second option where you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I tried my best and it didn't work out. Hey, what you got for me? I didn't have that. And so that was, I think, the driving force for me.
So well said. And what I hear, if I could summarize what you said in one word, which doesn't do it justice, of course, is just commitment.
Yes.
You don't have a plan B. And I think that's where so many individuals aspiring for these big, audacious goals, golf and otherwise, make a mistake. They're interested in the accolades, the accomplishment, the money, the success, the happiness. But there's a huge difference between being interested in a goal and committed to a goal. And the truth is, we crave comfort. And that's what our subconscious's primary responsibility is, to keep us safe. So when it comes to making the shift towards commitment, we really can't do it alone. We need a team, we need others, or in this case, which I love, we need no other option. And I think having no plan B is a wonderful, almost invisible framework that keeps you focused on all that you can control in one path, which is forward towards that goal.
Absolutely, yeah, and when I look back, I'm in the towards the end of the winter in Alabama, and just those days of practice when it's 35 degrees and it's 30-mile-an-hour wind, and your hands would go numb after 20 minutes of putting, so you'd go back to the clubhouse for 10 minutes, let them warm up, get your feeling back, and go back out there. But I was the only person on that course, and I know I was the only person practicing in Birmingham, and I knew I was probably the only person practicing in those conditions. So what it meant was when I got those conditions on a golf course, boy, I felt as comfortable as anyone out there, because I just knew that I was prepared for this. And when people tee it up on the first hole and all of a sudden they're used to 70 degrees and it's 40 degrees and it's 20-mile-an-hour wind, they don't have that frame of reference because they avoid it at all costs. I embraced it. I enjoyed it. And there was that great feeling and sense of accomplishment at the end. If you had worked hard and smart and got something out of that practice session, and you knew that 99% of your playing partners or your competitors haven't had that happen to them, that really made me feel like, okay, there's one for the good guys right there. That's one that I can drag back in my memory and know that I am going to be way more prepared than anyone else in this field.
I imagine, I hear like mental edge there. There's a competitive edge. You can show up, and I will say I identify as a local Floridian now. I've been down here 10, 11 years. I did tee off in 37-degree weather in January. So I feel very proud that I had the kahunas to do that, being so and really just not afraid of the cold, but I dislike the cold, which is why I cold plunge almost every day, just to build up that. What I think is an intangible for you, Gary, is this mental toughness. There's, if I think of mental toughness as an umbrella term, there's equal parts discipline, there's grit, there's persistence, but I almost hear there is growing more comfortable being uncomfortable. Aside from, putting yourself in these practice conditions, how else did you prioritize cultivating this mental toughness and discipline?
Well, I think it's because I understood that it was my competitive edge. We're all looking for competitive edges. And, I look at physically, what do I bring to the table? And I don't bring a lot to the table. I hit it dead straight. I hit a lot of greens, which is great. So basically that's the ceiling to what I can do. I was an okay chipper and putter, but just not quite good enough. And, I worked hard on that, but I just couldn't quite find whatever it was to be a consistently good chipper and putter. In patches, it was great. And other patches, it was just average. So I knew that the one competitive edge I could have would be to be mentally tougher than everyone else. And I felt like, if I worked really hard on the physical game, I could maybe get a 5% edge on where I was before. Or if I worked hard on the short game, same thing. I was just sort of limited by physical talent. But I felt like if I worked on that mental toughness route to gain a competitive edge, maybe that's a 10, 20, 30% increase in my competitive advantage. And that's where I saw sort of the bang for the buck. And, I think with limited resources, you've got to prioritize the resources that you do have to be able to find the most, the best use of those limited resources. And that was by far the simplest thing. It just took me a little longer than I should have done to figure it out.
I just keep coming back to these intangibles of a winner. And I'll probably say it right now, that will more or less be some form of the title of this conversation. It's incredible. Like just this deep belief that I have the ability to win and to continue to have that validated, improved year after year. The mental toughness, really beginning to recognize, genetics, the universe dealt me this hand of physical traits. I'm not going to allow that to limit my potential and where my success ends. I'm going to do the work to craft out every other edge I can get. And I really think too, especially when you were coming up on the mini tours and eventually the tour, even more so then, the mental and emotional sides of the game just were not given any time of day. And I have an imagination, it was almost still woo-woo, an afterthought, if you will. It still is today by most people. For the golfer listening, especially that single-digit handicap with scratch aspirations, what message would you share with him or her about the value of leaning in to cultivate a competitive edge through the mental game?
Well, I just think it's the best use of your time. I mean, you just think about, if you're striving to become scratch and you have a job, you have a wife, kids, a husband, kids, you have responsibilities, you have time commitments, in order to, maybe go from a 6 to a scratch, and you think of what it is you need to do mechanics wise, that's a lot of time needs to be invested that you don't have. And I think, again, you look at that bang for the buck of the combination of your time availability and how long it would take and the time commitment to get way better at that side of things. And I think, again, it's a no-brainer. It's, as you said so rightly, it was, the mental side of things was a little bit of a, not voodoo, but it was the last resort. You would do everything you could to perfect the swing, perfect the short game of the putting, and then when that didn't work, maybe you would try the physical side or get in the gym as hard as you can, and then when that didn't work, well, I guess I'll try the mental side. That Bob Rotella seems to know what he's talking about. I'll read a couple of books and kind of half-arse it, and I think there's that, especially for a professional golfer, but I think for the club golfer as well. When you think of golfers, a lot of them tend to be relatively high achievers in life. If you play golf in America, you are a relatively wealthy person, which would mean you would be relatively successful, relatively educated. And I think people don't like to admit weakness, and especially personality weakness and character weakness. And so instead of framing it as it's a character flaw or it's a personality flaw, I think you look at it as a chance to improve, a chance to improve, not just on the golf course, but in life as well. And if you look at that, I'm working with a guy right now who wants to get the scratch, and he's been very successful in life. And, the first lesson was what I would have expected. Okay, where's my swing? What do I need to do better with the swing? And I said, look, you're a 6 handicap for a reason. You hit the ball really well. But every time you mishit one, you kind of react in the wrong way. And, there's every chance that reaction would lead to maybe not the greatest focus on the next shot, which might lead to another mishit, and there's a bogey, and you do that a few times, then you throw in a double in there. You're good enough to make a couple of birdies around and a boatload of pars, but you just make too many bogeys because maybe shot selection, decision making, emotional control, reactions, all of these things are affecting the ability to focus to give yourself the best chance in each shot. And so my job as a coach, and as what it was as a player, is to communicate that and to sell why, and sell this is going to help you, and this is why. Not you should do mental stuff, and that's my advice. This is why, and this is let's go through this hole that you've just played, and let's be honest about how you were thinking in between shots and over the shot. And I think you'll get your answer. I was never really committed to that club. I knew that was the wrong club, or I knew that was the wrong shot, or I knew I was aiming in the wrong spot, but I hit it anyway. Pia Nielsen and Lynn Marriott wrote the book, I think, every shot has a purpose, and you want to stop those anyway shots. My goal with my game, and my goal with people like this fellow that I'm trying to help, is to have him have no regrets after the shot. And if you can have no regrets, and accept that the game is really, really hard, you're going to have your best chance to have the best opportunity to shoot your best scores.
Incredibly well said. And I echo that. And when people come to work with me, I am often the last resort. They feel they have tried everything. Yeah. And it's always interesting to me too. And I think I'm biased because, hypnosis in particular and mindset coaching literally changed my life personally and professionally. Yet there's still this stigma, this negative connotation that it's a sign of weakness, not only asking for help, but like something is, I'm using air quotes, wrong with my mind. Well, that's because you're hardwired for safety, for comfort and familiarity. And your subconscious influences 95% of what you do every day. So if you're truly committed to and serious about change, you might want to take a look under the surface to see what's going on and leading to the current subpar results you're getting.
Yeah. Well, there's comfort in 2 + 2 = 4. They want to see tangible numbers or results. So that's why TrackMan is really popular. It's a very useful tool because we can see numbers, and we can say that if you were -8 and now you're -5 on whatever, that's better. You've improved. There you go. Pat you on the back and off you go. Well, that's great, but you can also manipulate those numbers and make a number happen to please the coach. And then you go right back to what you were on the golf course. So, there's, when it comes to changing your swing, you've got to practice so smartly and efficiently, and you've got to hit so many balls. But here's the word, I'll use the air quotes as well, correctly, to actually fundamentally change anything. So if you're just hitting balls and you're just, doing the same thing and you think you're doing something different, all you're doing is solidifying a bad habit. So that's the hard thing about understanding. And again, that's the sales pitch I give to say, hey, look, you work 5 days a week, you work 50 hours a week, your kids play baseball. In order for you to fundamentally change this over-the-top swing that you have, you're going to have to hit thousands of balls correctly over a course of months, where you're hitting thousands of balls in the course of 2 or 3 weeks at a time to actually change this, to make it permanent. Do you have the time to commit to that? And most of them will be honest and say no. Some will pretend that they do have enough time, and they'll give it a go for the first couple of weeks, and then nothing changes, so they just give up and go back to what they were doing before. And that's the hard thing. I mean, that's why golf is so difficult when you've ingrained some bad habits. And so it's the same with the mental training, and we've ingrained some really bad habits. But we can, in the privacy of our own home, practice to change that. And I don't think it takes nearly as long as having to hit thousands of balls correctly over the period of months and months and months. It's just that commitment. It's almost like the signs of being a addictive personality. You've got to first admit you got a problem. And it's really interesting to listen to people who don't think they have a problem, and they put it down to bad luck, or they put it down to being in between clubs, or they put it down to weather conditions or green conditions or whatever else it is. And, it's to, once you get past that firewall, then all of a sudden they understand. And it's like the light bulb goes off, but you've got to really work hard to explain the why and to keep coming up with examples. And they may not see that validity in, 2 or 3 sessions. And then they may just say, well, what's the point of doing this? Because I'm not seeing any benefits. And then all of a sudden, that day will come where they're on the course and they're pulling the club and they said, this is the wrong choice. And this is why. I now remember what that silly Englishman was telling me that was annoying me, because I kept getting in his head trying to ask him what he's thinking. I'm going to make a different decision here, and I'm going to make a way more committed swing, and I'm going to hit a shot that's way more commensurate with the expectations that I should have. Now I can make a free-flowing swing now. Wow, look at that. I just hit a really good shot.
Love that. So well said. And my listeners will probably roll their eyes when I say this for the 1,000th time, but it's a beautiful example, what you just shared, of shifting from unconscious reaction to conscious response, knowing, oh, I should pull this club, not this club, and consciously choosing something different to create a different result. I love that. And I'm curious, it's a 2-part question, I believe here, is what did mental training look like for you? And in hindsight, what was the obstacle, the mental or emotional obstacle that most held you back from playing at that next level?
Well, I think it was the conventional wisdom. So I did what everyone else does. I worked really hard on my game for years and years and years and years, and tried to perfect the swing, trying to make it. My thought process was that if my swing gets so good, I'll shoot in the 60s every time I play, just because it's so good. I mean, it's simple, it's logical, and I kept working on that premise, and it would work so well in that it was winning tournaments every year. But when push came to shove at second stage of qualifying school, it didn't work when it needed to on the last round or the back nine of the last round to get to final stage, to give yourself a chance, an opportunity to move up. And so the realization came when, I was driving back from, I think, the fifth year in a row of failing at second stage, and saying to myself, I've got to do something different. I have to do something different. And then that's where again, it was part luck, because when I got home after a 5-hour journey of frustration and anger and not knowing what I'm doing and not knowing what the plan is and wanting to change something but not knowing what to change, it was part luck in that I went to my room that I have all my golf stuff in. It was dirty. I cleaned it up by chucking everything in the closet, and there was a box with some golf psychology and some mental training and some relaxation literature, and at that time audio tapes that two people had given me almost a decade before, that had just been sitting in that corner just collecting dust. And literally the secret to me playing on the PGA Tour was sitting there in plain sight. And I could have been, instead of one of the oldest rookies in the PGA Tour, an average age rookie at about 30. And so when I looked at that, so I'd looked at the golf psychology stuff, about a decade before, and I kind of read through it, and it looks cool and everything, and it's a bit too complicated. I don't know about this. I'm just going to get back to working on the swing. And so when I pulled that back out, all of a sudden it just made complete sense to me. It's work by Deborah Graham and John Stabler, the 8 Traits of Champion Golfers. Yep. So I recommend that to all the people I work with, to take the personality profile, to kind of see where you're hardwired and where your weaknesses are, and then we can work on the weaknesses. And so I started reading it, and it just made complete sense to me, because everything I read was, I could see myself in there. And here's what I liked more than anything. With most golf psychology books, it just seemed like there was a bunch of just anecdotes. I love Bob Rotella, but there was a lot of cool little stories and everything. But it didn't really feel like I was being directed for me, for my personal journey. Well, this really spoke to me in the, okay, I see this is me, this is me, this is me. And at the end of the chapter, these are some actionable things you can actually do. Well, there you go. There's my plan. And it was talking about tension and body tension and mental tension and that affecting your focus and that affecting your physical game. And then the mental tapes and the relaxation tapes were there as well. So I put everything together, and that's where I knew there was that 25% competitive advantage just sitting right there. So when I did it, I didn't just think, well, let's give it a go. I said, this is it. I'm doing it. And I'm not just going to do it. I'm going to go fully all in, probably as much as anyone's ever gone into it. Yeah. Exactly. But it was great in that I didn't have to sit and and ah and think, is this worth it? Like if you maybe wanted to improve your putting and, you thought, well, maybe should I see Dave Stockton, or should I see Dave Peltz, or should I see Stan Utley, and then maybe kind of read up against them, and I'm not sure. There was no doubt. And this spoke to me. And then that's where the commitment, the journey started, where I would practice. I committed to practicing less physically, saving that time and using that time to work at home on that aspect. And I'm actually, the problem is I don't have a Walkman anymore. And I'm not sure if those tapes still work because of age and how old they are. But I really want to get them out again, because I need that right now. I need to reconnect with that side, because I was just talking to my wife on the way back. I played a little tournament, first tournament in years and years, and it felt horrific. Yippee with the putt and stroke. I was hitting the ball well, which I always do, but the weakness of my game was putting. And it just was a very uncomfortable, unpleasant experience. And I knew that, I haven't mentally trained for years and years and years. And it's something that you lose the ability to do if you haven't done it for so long. It's just like any other talent. You've got to keep working at it. And so I'm actually quite excited because I want to get back to exceptionalism, which will help me with all aspects of my personal life and my career. And I know that that's what's going to help me get back to where I was before, to keep me way more focused and waste less time.
Hey, really quick, imagine this. In a single calendar year, you drop your handicap by 6 strokes. You win multiple tournaments and shoot your best round ever. Oh, and you also win Player of the Year in your golf league. That's exactly what my client Luke did in 2024. In a matter of months, he dropped his handicap from an 8.1 to a 1.6. His secret, the only thing he changed about his game, he invested in mindset coaching and high performance hypnotherapy. And through our work together, he was able to conquer fear, release doubt and anxiety, calm his nerves, drastically turn up the volume of confidence, and finally start playing in attack mode. If you're listening to this show, I already know you've got the passion, you've got the work ethic and the commitment to play to your potential. Now it's time to master the mental game to get you there. Use the link in the show notes below to book a mindset coaching discovery call with me today, and let's make playing to your potential a habit. For everybody listening, I mean, those last, 8 to 10 minutes was a masterclass in and of itself. So many key takeaways, but really stands out to me, Gary, is like less time on the physical training in favor of more time spent on the mental training. So not only are you saving time, I mean, let's be frank, your joints, your muscles are getting a little reprieve as well. You're sharper. You have more time where you can sleep, recover, and continue to perform your best day after day. So there's a longevity principle there as well. And then I love what you said also in that the mindset training we all do has a positive ripple effect into every area of our life. I think that is so misunderstood or underappreciated. You might show up wanting to improve your mental game for golf, but it's going to positively influence how you show up as a husband or a wife, as a father, a mother, a business owner, employer, employee, a neighbor, a friend, a family member. It's the gift that keeps on giving should you choose to make it a priority. So
yeah. I mean, mental health is such an important part of life now, and now we actually understand, how important it is, and businesses are now actually understanding that their employees do need rest and they do need to take vacation, and it is, I just feel so busy at the moment. My mind is busy, and it's a thing that I don't enjoy, where I don't feel the focus that I need to have in everything I'm doing. I love gardening, and I get lost in that. And that's my time where I don't have focus issues. I don't have other thoughts popping into my mind because I'm very task oriented. I really enjoy starting to see a mess, and at the end of it, starting to see it look more like I want it to. And that is how I want to go about the rest of my life. But there's so many distractions. That bloody phone. I didn't have a phone when I was playing professional golf. And, I can't believe when I watch, so-called kids who want to become really good players hit 4 shots and then go get on their phone. It just baffles me that they can't understand that, if you're going to do something, you've got to be fully engaged. I work with a college, a local college, and just for a few months, just to kind of see what it was all about. I just couldn't believe the lack of focus of, it wasn't just phones, it was just talking, it was goofing around, it was, you're here for a time, for a period to get work done. Get that work done, and then set some time aside to goof off and look at your phone and do whatever else you need to do. But you can't do it half and half. If you do that, you're only going to get half the benefit out of it. You might as well sit at home and drink coffee.
So well said. Now, we've taken a bit of a roundabout approach, and this was intentional on my end and kind of leading our conversation. I really wanted to highlight the long list of intangibles you possess, the out-of-the-box thinking, and the atypical work ethic and how you spent your time and energy to experience the success you have. And I think for everybody listening, if you stopped listening here, this would be worth listening to 10 times over to fully begin to absorb the wisdom as Gary has shared. But Gary, now I do want you to take us back. You have made the decision to come to the States to focus more on golf. Pick up right there from your journey and take us through your golf journey, and we'll begin to be able to fill in the blanks ourselves as to where and how these intangibles and skills and this depth of commitment you had really began to come to fruition along the way.
But I think it's that mindset of, I don't want to have an excuse for not performing the way I think I'm capable of performing. So the reason I came to America was I came from very humble upbringing. We didn't have a ton of resources, just a blue collar kid. And so I have something on my resume that is highly atypical from PGA Tour players, which was having a full-time job. So I left high school at 18 and worked as a pensions administrator. And I was trying to play amateur golf, playing at the weekend. So I guess I was a gentleman amateur. I had a real job, and I was playing in tournaments at the weekends. And, I was competitive, but I'd never won anything. When I played with players, I felt like, man, they don't do anything different from me. But I just had that built-in excuse of, well, they play 7 days a week and I play twice a week. Some of those, the majority of those guys were, wealthy enough where their parents could support them. Some other guys would work night shifts to be able to afford to play golf. So, that was just physically incredibly demanding. And so I felt the best opportunity I had was to try and earn a golf scholarship or a place on a golf team to just give me an opportunity to play 7 days a week. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to say, again, I wanted to see how good I could get with no excuses in the way. And so once I removed that built-in excuse, then again, it's in my hands. The control is up to me of how well I do and how well I apply myself with that extra time. And so I went on a golf tryout. Wasn't a terribly well organized one. I didn't play great, but I got offered a spot on a junior college team, not a scholarship, a spot. So I had to walk on to a junior college team. So to walk on to a junior college team to earn a spot on the PGA Tour, again, it shows the journey. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And so it was all. I think I missed the first tournament. I didn't qualify for the first tournament, and then I made every other one. But I hated not making that first tournament so much. It just drove me, and I didn't have a car. I had to learn the art of diplomacy to have people take me and pick me up because I wanted to stay later than everyone else, and I would befriend people who worked in the pro shop who locked up at dark, and I'd tell my teammates, hey, you go home, I'm going to ride home with Jimmy or whoever. And I won, I applied that and I won a number of times as a junior college player, which earned me a scholarship to Auburn. And so, then you go up a level and you still maintain that competitiveness. And I never won at Auburn, but I had a runner-up and I had a number of top tens, and I was all SEC in my junior year. So there's the belief of understanding that you have something. It's not obviously the finished product yet, but you have the kernel of the talent to be able to play this game at maybe a higher level. And then that senior year came.
Quick.
Yeah.
Knowing, I know you're going to cover this more, but knowing you won multiple times per year on these mini tours, what do you think was either missing or holding you back from claiming that first spot during your college years?
I just don't think I was a developed enough player at that time. I was self-taught until I was 26, so I didn't have any coaching. And so obviously there were some swing issues and some physical issues that weren't quite good enough to win at that higher level. I was playing, that was in the days of Stuart Sink and Nota Begay and Tiger Woods and Justin Leonard. There's some pretty good players to beat, and they were playing a lot of the tournaments I was playing in. And so it was good. Again, I didn't have the resources to get lessons. I didn't have the money to have lessons. So what I always did, I was always a naturally inquisitive person. And so when I started playing, I would always play with older, better players than me and just watch them and ask them questions. We had a guy at my club in England, Addington Palace, that played a few events on the European Tour. And when Dougie Walker arrived at the golf course, he just walked differently. I mean, he looked like he was 6'5", and he carried himself a certain way. His clothes were the best clothes in the golf club. And as soon as he arrived, I just rushed to the practice area to watch him practice. And would ask him questions, and I probably bugged him too much, but he was generous with just give me the odd nugget, and so that was basically my coaching of just playing with better players, watching, learning, and applying. And so I got to a pretty good level of an all SEC level with that mindset, and then being around really good college players and learning a bit from them. And then obviously there was that bad senior year, and then that led to 2 or 3 years in the wilderness of trying to get my game to a level where I could justify turning pro. And I think, in total it was about 4 years from the senior year to shooting in the mid-60s every time I played and in the 60s every time I traveled. And that attracted enough people around town to club together and sponsor me.
Incredible. So you've received this sponsorship, which I have an imagination is incredibly validating to the sacrifices, the effort, the time you've put in. Your belief and confidence dials are slowly climbing to that max 10 out of 10. What happens in the next chapter? You have this sponsorship, and where does the journey take you?
Yeah, and it was, I don't even know if we had a contract. It was, I went out, and so I went from I was a membership director. Well, I had 2 jobs, I guess, on my resume. So I was a membership director at a Inverness Country Club in Birmingham, and I just played every day with the members, played with prospective members, and there was validation in that I'd earned that sponsorship. It wasn't just a family member saying, here's $20,000, go play golf, enjoy it. I had earned it over the course of 4 years of college, and then 4 years of grinding and trying to perfect my talents without coaching. And so that first year I went out and won 4 times on the Teardrop Tour, was one of the players of the year. And, again, there was that validation of, man, that did translate pretty well. That hard work has, I still have the ability to win. It didn't faze me playing for a living. I'd played a few odd mini tour events where I slept in a van and, just anything to save money. I was paying for it myself, basically. And so I'd won a couple of events doing that, but it was just sporadic of, once every month or 2, I'd play a tournament. So it wasn't really a professional career. But that first full year to win 4 times and to get straight to third stage of qualifying or final stage was incredible. I mean, it was... what a jump that was. So it was like a graph of your career. It had some pretty nice peaks through most of college, then a massive valley that kind of plateaued and then gently rose. And then 4 years later, just went skyward again. So it was, it was a pretty impressive little period there.
Yeah, just incredible. I'm so happy that we got to share and discuss some of the intangibles present all along. Obviously, some of them still growing in the background with each new temporary setback and learning lesson. But one thing that stood out, I'd love for you to explain more. If I heard you correctly, you mentioned a 5th failed attempt at second stage, correct?
Yes.
Where was your mind there? Where was your belief in yourself? And what came next after that?
Yeah, so that was that mindset of, okay, is this as good as it's going to get? I'm going to be a mini tour player for life. I'm going to make money, but with a wife and a young family, you can't be a dad and a husband and provide the way you're supposed to provide, putting $10,000 in your pocket at the end of the year. That's not going to work. So that was the impetus. So number one, I didn't have a plan B, and number 2, I had to do it. I had to improve greatly to fulfill my roles as a husband and as a dad first, and then as a golfer second. And so that's when I found the golf psychology literature and audio tapes. made the decision. And again, I think it goes back to that inquisitive nature of I wasn't just going to just read a Bob Rotella book and say, okay, now I'm a golf psychology follower. It was how in depth can I get and why, and what will this do to me? And I read a ton of books, the relaxation response, psychocybernetics, all the literature from Deborah and John, all the audio tapes. So I did subliminal tapes. So where I got the relaxation and the audio tapes was a fellow called Dr. Art Pfeiffer. He was a preeminent clinical psychologist who I believe was the first American to present in Russia in communist times because he was so highly regarded. And so, he was the best friend of who became my coach in Dallas, a fellow called David Clay. And, he gave me the stuff, and I kind of again half-assed it when I first got it given to me and put it in the box. And then when it came back out, it was in such depth, but he just made it sound simple of, okay, you do this is going to work. But when you think about actually what it was, so it was subliminal tapes where, it was seagulls and waves crashing, but underlaid underneath that was a tape on positive thinking, on enthusiasm, optimism, self-confidence, self-image, all these relaxation, all of these incredible messages that I knew I had to strengthen as a perennial underdog. You had certain, not character flaws, but character deficiencies or personality deficiencies where, you are what you are. I'm an undersized, under-talented golfer. And so I had to really burnish those. But then we went in further into this. So that was easy. You could just pop that on and read a book or something. But then there was autogenics, where you would get in a super relaxed state, have some, I would imagine you would be very familiar with that. Just have a phrase that you would say to yourself in that relaxed state. And then when you said that phrase in golf on the course, you could immediately relax and bring the tension levels down. There was, deep visualization. There was deep muscle relaxation. There was tension relaxation release. There was, just a whole variety of techniques that I just did over and over and over again. And then reading what I was reading with Deborah, it all kind of joined together where I could see that if I did the stuff on Deborah on its own and I did the stuff from Dr. Pfeiffer on its own, they would have been effective. But together, they were an incredibly powerful tool. And I just saw the results immediately. Again, kind of like going back to Doug Walker at my golf club, I just felt different when I teed it up in that first tournament because I just felt I have the secret. I have the competitive advantage now. And that year I played about 25 events or so and never finished outside the top 6 in any event. And that was the validation because you weren't playing well for all those 25 events. Maybe half of them I was playing well. A quarter of them I was playing okay, and a quarter of them I was playing poorly, but would find a way to turn scores that put me out of contention the previous year to find a way to stay in contention and then have a good day the next day. Incredible. I was actually more resilient. That was the thing that really jumped out in that. If it was one of those poor weeks where you're just a little bit off, you could hang in there enough and then find a way to shoot 67 in the last round that you have no business shooting, but you managed to shoot it based on your physical talents that week. There was no way you were going to shoot that, but you did. When you see those years that Tiger had when he was hitting it all over the place and still winning tournaments, where half the field would have missed the cut, hitting it where he hit it. But he was so resilient. And then when it came down to it, he would split the fairway and hit it on the green and par the last to win by 1, or birdie the last to win by 1, or whatever it was. That was kind of what I felt like. I just felt not exactly bulletproof, but I sort of almost had that cloak of invincibility that I just felt like it didn't matter how I was playing. I was going to play well that week.
So you're 40 years old and you finally earned that coveted pro card. Walk us through that moment, that experience. I would love to hear what that was like for you.
Well, don't forget, we've got to skip another 6 years. So once I finally did get to the Corn Ferry Tour, that was 6 more years. So that was 12 years of mini tour and Corn Ferry. But in that time, I won in my third year on the Corn Ferry Tour, but didn't quite get my card. I missed out in the top 25 and then was exempt to final stage, and top 25 get their cards. I finished 26. So I was yet again so near, but yet so far. And then 2011, again, there was that rededication to the mental side and just played great. Every statistic physically, I wasn't a better golfer. I didn't swing it any better, but because mentally I was so good and emotionally I was so strong and resiliency, I was just incredible. Every statistic was basically top 20, apart from driving distance. But fortunately, I was in the top 2 or 3 for accuracy. But even with a lack of driving distance, I was top 10 in birdies and things like that. So it was an amazing feeling just to see what I've always said. I just wanted to see what my potential could give me, and to see that, to play on arguably the second toughest golf tour in the world and perform the way I did was phenomenal. And to have an opportunity to go into the final round in Pittsburgh in 2011 at the Milan Classic, to know if I won, I have a PGA Tour card wrapped up. But it was just it just felt it was meant to be. It just felt like I had worked so hard for this, and I now deserve this. I have punched the clock long enough, and I've done everything I can do, and now let's just let it happen. And so actually in my yardage book, on every page I wrote, "It's my time." And I looked at that before every shot. And so, that just gave me goosebumps just thinking of that. And I just played great. I was in complete control. I beat Kevin Kisner down the stretch, which, certainly isn't an easy task to do. But it was an amazing feeling. The only time it got tough was on the last hole. Adrenaline, I hit this 3-wood, maybe 300 yards, and almost hit it in the penalty area. Okay. And in my head, I couldn't do the math to figure out what I was trying to do on the second shot. And in all honesty, I didn't have the greatest caddy, and he wasn't much help. And so I got a little bit frustrated because I wasn't feeling like the number was right, and I was pacing it off. And finally, I committed to it and hit a decent shot up by the green. And then, chipped it on, wiggled down the putt to 6 inches, and to know that you have a 6-inch putt to get your PGA Tour card that you can't miss. And just to know what that had meant, and potentially what an inspiration that could be to other people of, man, this is a pretty good story right here. And, it was made so much more special where Arnold Palmer was the honorary tournament chairman. So someone took a picture of me holding that 6-inch putt from a tour card. He signed the picture. And, what was... English people don't get overly emotional, but it was incredible where you stayed in the moment. Unfortunately, I wear a pretty thick layer of sunscreen because I'm quite pale, and so I had something in my eye, and I just brushed my eye, and I got sunscreen in my eye, so I couldn't actually see the last putt I made because my eyes were watering so much. So it looked like I was crying as I made the last putt. I wasn't, but Kay Cockrell interviewed me afterwards, and it just... I was speechless. I was literally speechless. And, all I remember saying is, when you leave your friends, your family, your country, and I don't even know what I said after that, but that's what it meant to me, just to go through that journey. And I always think the journey is more interesting than the destination. And to have that journey and to have all those experiences and to better yourself and to improve yourself along the way as well. That was the added bonus.
So well said. Inspiration doesn't even do it justice. Just the level of perseverance, grit, patience, persistence is immaculate. I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to connect with you, to share not only your story for the listeners, but selfishly for me. And I'm curious, you've gone on from golf to have a successful career as a broadcaster and analyst, and you've really seen the game from so many unique perspectives. And I'm curious, for the golfer listening, single-digit handicap, maybe scratch already, what's the one thing they still misunderstand about the mindset of a tour player?
I think it's the number one, they don't tend to beat themselves. they stay in a hole. They stay in the game. They stay in a round. The majority of the time, obviously, there's some rounds where they give up and it just goes. But I cover the PGA Tour on PGA Tour Live and watch every shot of the marquee group or the feature group. So these are the best of the best on the PGA Tour. And it's just fascinating to see how many bad shots they hit and how many bad putts they hit and how many bad chips they hit. And they end up shooting 67. And it's just, they stay in a round and they have obviously this incredible talent, but they just turn fives into fours 2 or 3 times around. And they turn fours into threes by one incredible shot. And that's, to me, is what you can learn from the PGA Tour players. It just takes one great shot a hole. And it also means hanging in the hole, hanging in the round, because good things will happen. And if you've given up and you've just got sloppy, it doesn't matter when that good period comes because you're going to be so far behind. And, I always talk, there's a 45-minute stretch in everyone's round. Whether you're a 20 handicapper, it might mean you make 2 pars in 3 holes. If you're a scratch player, you might make a couple of birdies in 3 holes. And all of a sudden, that can completely flip around. But if you're a scratch player and you're 9 over par because you've given up and you got down on yourself and you've sulked and you've made bad decisions and you got sloppy, that 2 under par stretch doesn't matter. But if you've hung in there and you've ground out every shot and you've tried your best on every shot and you've treated every shot as just as important as every other shot, you may be 4 over par, and now all of a sudden you're 2 over par. Now all of a sudden you've got a chance to have a really good round. And that is the mindset that PGA Tour players take. And, I just marvel. And, it's been, over a decade since I was last a PGA Tour player. And obviously I did that. But I marvel at how well they do that. We kind of focus on the 350-yard drives and the spectacular pitch shots and everything. But I marvel more about the ability to stay present, stay in, do all the cliches you could possibly think of, one shot at a time, stay in the present. That's what makes you successful. And it's not very sexy, but it's so effective. And that's what I would recommend club players do, is just understand what that cliche means of just being as focused as you could possibly be on this shot. Whether it's for a triple bogey or an eagle, you pay the same attention to it and you try just as hard on that shot as you would for a shot that doesn't in it what you would think would be meaningless.
It's a micro example of commitment. Still committing to that shot no matter what, the score, the expectation, the supposed influence on the outcome of the round or the hole. I love that. And Gary, I would love to have you back on because you are a wealth of knowledge, a library of wisdom. But for right now, where can our listeners go to not only learn more about your story, but to learn more about the wisdom you've gleaned and shared and to connect with you further about continuing to share your story with maybe them and their fellow golfers?
Yeah, I have a website, www.garychristiangolf.com. And so that kind of shows a little microcosm of me from, the playing bio to the media reel to corporate entertaining, to public speaking, to coaching, and to travel hosting. And so, I've got a few strings to the bow, and that's the challenge right now, trying to figure out which one would be the best use of my time to be able to focus really hard and again be exceptional rather than just be good at everything, just be decent and above average at everything. I want to be exceptional, and so that's a really good resource. But I just wrote a book as well, Beat the Course, Not Yourself. So a pretty simple title, pretty self-explanatory. But it's a really simple book to read. It's in a story form. I read a book called 7 Days in Utopia, and I love that premise of a story with lessons and life lessons and coaching involved. And so I wrote it in a similar kind of vein with my co-writer, Dr. Kurt Ickes, who's a sports psychologist. And it's a story of a 15-year-old competitive golfer who struggles mightily in tournaments, has that pivotal moment, makes the pivot to turn around how he thinks, starts working with a wise old pro and dedicates himself more to the mental side, the preparation, the emotional preparation, relaxation, focus, good decision making, managing expectations, all of these things that will be really helpful. And then he plays obviously a great tournament, doesn't win, so it's not the Hollywood ending, but he plays his best tournament he's ever played. And a college coach comes up to him, tells him how much he enjoyed watching the way he played, and that's the kind of thing he looks for. So at first it was kind of designed for the competitive teenager, which no one had really ever addressed before, but it's just as relevant for club golfers. It's just exactly the same things that will help a 15-year-old competitive golfer trying to earn a golf scholarship is just as relevant for a 15 handicapper trying to do a little better in the dogfight. What I really liked, though, about that book was for competitive teenagers, I think it's more important for the parents to read, to understand what their kid's going through, because there are some poisonous moments that you see in junior golf where the parents are they just don't understand. Maybe they're not golfers themselves, and they're saying, well, I'm paying all this money for these lessons and flying around the country for tournaments. Why does my son keep shooting 82? And why does my daughter keep missing greens with a wedge in her hand and making double? Well, they're not trying to do it, but they just haven't been given the path, and they haven't been helped of how to practice, how to prepare, how to make good decisions, and play smart golf. It's really golf IQ. And what I like is I feel like the podcast space is really helping change golf, because I think there's a move back towards wisdom and IQ and common sense rather than just raw data and numbers and 2 + 2 = 4. When you think about it, when you think of Butch Harmon, he learned it from his dad, and his dad learned it from his dad, and his dad probably learned it from some old grey-bearded Scotsman from the 19th century. And so it is actionable advice that the best coach in the world has just taken on from decades, maybe centuries of wisdom. And, I like to think wisdom goes a long way. If I'm going to get investment advice, I'm probably going to see Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett, I don't think he's going to baffle me with a lot of science and algorithms. He's going to explain in simple terms why this is a good investment and why this isn't. And I think that we want to make golf simpler, and we want to be more effective in how we help people. And I think the hardest thing is almost like the sales job. And if you can get that sales job right and give the people a reason why this is important, what it is you're going to do, what the path is, and how this is going to help you, then I think that's where people really buy into the wisdom and they move forward. And more importantly, they get better and they enjoy the game. It's a really difficult, really expensive, really time-consuming game. And we want to try and do it as well as we possibly can and actually enjoy it. And so I think, these types of conversations and reading my book, I think would really help that. So Beat the Course, Not Yourself, available on Amazon for the price of a premium sleeve of golf balls. It will give you a lifetime of wisdom to help you with your game long term, rather than maybe 9 holes of golf with those Titleist are in the woods.
So maybe you'll be able to keep those golf balls a heck of a lot longer too after reading the book.
Yeah.
Gary, that's incredible. And I'll have the link to your website and obviously the book below. I thank you so much for making the time to join me, to share all of your wisdom and experience with us. And I look forward to having you on again in the near future.
Well, I'd love to do it. As I said, I love a conversation and I love thoughtful, insightful questions. And Paul, you did a great job. That was really fun to chat.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And for those of you listening, thank you for tuning in to another episode. I know you found immense value in this conversation. So not only do I need you to set aside time to listen to it again, to have a note-taking approach handy, go share it with a friend, a fellow golfer, so the two of you, or more than that, can all begin to shoot lower scores and enjoy the game of golf that much more. Thank you again for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Hit them straight this weekend, and we'll catch you in the next episode.